Dustin, you are so good. Man, we've got Dustin Ulmer in the background running this event, and he just gave us a thumbs up. It's 9 o'clock and we are ready to roll. Thank you, Dustin, for handling our event, doing all the testing, getting our speakers up and running. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dale Hegland. It's my privilege and honor to be with you today. I'm part of the North Dakota LTAP team. North Dakota LTAP means Local Technical Assistance Program. We're here to help. By the way, we've got Minnesota and South Dakota LTAPs as part of this event too, and we're joining the Northland chapter of ATSSA with wonderful help from John Jacobs with SRF. So powerful event the next 2 days. So glad you're able to spend time with us and learn a little bit, maybe the tip of the iceberg for what we would have had in person for the last 2 years with the ATSSA conference. And we've got some good material for you today. If you would, please use the Q&A section to ask questions, to add comments, to get involved. Please, we'd like some interaction and like to tap into what our subject matter experts have to share with us today. So please use the Q&A session. Today's event qualifies you for Road Scholar in North Dakota and in Minnesota if you are in those programs. If you are, we'll be posting in the Q&A section the Road Scholar. Please fill out if you're from Minnesota or from North Dakota. And then also a PDH form. If you fill either of those out and get them back to us, use them how they work best for you, we'd be very pleased. So please tap into that. And then a reminder that tomorrow we have another event running again till 11 o'clock from 9 o'clock. And spread the word. If you like what you learned today and you really want others to learn tomorrow, please pass this on. There's no registration. The link is live. But what if you missed it? What if one of your friends, your coworkers missed it? We're going to be recording this information, the presentations, recording, all the info that you get in the next 2 days is going to be put on the LTAP webpage. Next week, Dustin will have that posted and ready for you to grab and to refresh your memories, to learn more, and to pass it on. So great big thank you to Dustin and all of our speakers. We've got really powerful subject matter experts that are here to help us the next 2 days. And one of the things that one of our board members from ATSSA said, hey, remember it's St. Paddy's Day. So while I don't have any Irish in me, I do want to recognize and pay tribute to those that do. So we're a little bit of the green today. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to get kicked off by a stellar person, subject expert, someone with great passion for the industry, and that's Chris Rath. Chris is the administrative assistant with Newman. She's been there about 23 years. She has a bachelor's in science from Minot State University with a major in accounting and business. She serves as one of our North Dakota LTAP sign class subject matter experts. She does a phenomenal job of handing out information about why signing is important. And the thing that I really like about Chris is that they don't make signs, they save lives. And that's the passion that I see in the Northland chapter. That's the passion that we want to share with everyone, that safety is not just a tagline, but it's a passion that's in us that we need to emulate and pass out to others. So the next 2 days, the learning is to save lives. That's the bottom line. And thank you for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Chris, if you'd get us started for the next 2 days. Chris Rath.
Sure thing, Dale. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Rath, as Dale said, and I am the current president of the Northland ATSSA chapter. Also joining us today from the board is Christina Bennett, who will be participating as a presenter. So on behalf of Christina and I and the rest of our chapter, we are pleased to have you join us. And I could not go on without a big thank you to both Dale Hegland and John Jacobs for all the time and work they took to get this together so we could have some classes instead of the live how-to. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. The first how-to was held back in 1993 at the Doublewood Inn of Fargo. It was created as an opportunity for the players in our industry to come together with educational classes and networking opportunities. The first one started off as a simple pavement markings class. I hear they were expecting approximately 75 people, and they ended up with around 150. It was a success, and we have done nothing but grown since that first year. Average attendance now is approximately 450 to 500 people. So we have done a great job of growing this event. Of all the years we have done the how-to, nothing could ever stop us. Bad roads or even a blizzard, the show always continued. Sometimes attendance was low because our participants were out taking care of those snowy roadways, or people were not able to attend because they couldn't make it to Fargo because of the roads. We are one dedicated bunch of people trying to spread the word about safety. It took a pandemic to shut us down. When it hit in March of 2020, we were forced to cancel the how-to, and it was a sad day for all of us. The uncertainty of what was happening in the world weighed heavily on everyone's mind, and not being able to see our colleagues and friends at the how-to was the beginning of many missed social opportunities in 2020. Then again, in November of 2020, we were faced with the decision of having to decide what to do about the 2021 how-to, and it was with great reluctance that we made the decision to cancel it. To have 2 years of canceled educational safety opportunities was concerning, and that is how these mini sessions were born. Again, a huge shout out to Dale and John for putting in the work to get these together. 2022, however, we will be back, and it will be our 30th anniversary of the how-to. So I'm very excited to come back with a bang and hopefully add some fun into the mix. I work for Newman Signs in Jamestown, North Dakota, and we manufacture traffic signs. I give many tours at our facility, and I talk about what we do here to a lot of people. And one of the things I always say is we sell safety. Safety on our roadways so both drivers and workers can go home at night to their families. That is the reason I got involved in ATSSA some 15 years ago. We have a division here at Newman's that does traffic control in construction zones, and those are my employees, my coworkers, and my friends. They also attend the how-to conferences to get more education and safety. It is important to both them and to our company. Newman Signs supports me being involved with ATSSA, as well as the employees getting the education. ATSSA's focus and tagline is safe roads save lives. And we want our employees home safe at night, as I'm sure all of you do. I know online classes are not as fun as getting together in person and joking around and maybe having a beverage with your colleagues. I myself enjoy that very much. But we are happy that you were able to take the time today to join in the classes and educational opportunities. I hope and I know that we're going to see you all in March from the 14th to the 16th in 2022 in Fargo for the live event. So thank you all so much again for joining us, and we'll get the education started.
Wow, Chris, that is so cool. So can you feel the passion come out? And that's what I love, the Northland chapter, everybody involved, not just the board, the leaders, the people that attend have that kind of energy and passion to be good stewards of our roadway, to create that safe environment so everybody gets home. And I like how you said it too, for our friends, right? Man, North Dakota, we've got a population under 800,000. Cripe, we know almost everybody. That sounds pretty funny, but our upper Midwest isn't all that populated. They are our friends, neighbors, and family that are out there. So let's take care of them. So good session coming up. That's a little bit of intro from our board, the ATSSA Northland Chapter Board. And next up, we've got a little bit of information that's pretty cool. Remembering our foundation, how we got started, a little history of where we started. How did the how-to really get going? And to share that information, John is with us. He's one of the, well, he's the ignition to get this event off the ground. He is the energy to put the team together and presenters. So John, great big thank you. He's with SRF. He is full of wealth of knowledge, I should say. Minnesota DOT experience of what, 39 years. Oh my goodness. But in 2014, he did retire from Mndot and then took his experience to SRF, where he continues to share the passion of using technology, using good, sound principles to pick the products that we need. And that's what we're going to hear about in the next session, the MASH, the 350. What are the good safety aspects that we need on the roadway? And how do we select them, put them into place, and then challenge ourselves to jump up to that next level of learning, to try something new, to work with our vendors. Chris talked about the how-to face-to-face. That's one of the things that I certainly miss, along with everyone else, catching up with the vendor, seeing what's new so that I know what to recommend to put on the roadway. So that's coming back. You're right, Chris. 2022 March, can't wait. That's going to be good. But until then, let's kick it off with John. He's a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. He's a registered professional engineer in the state of Minnesota and a professional traffic operations engineer. John retired, as mentioned, in 2014 from Minnesota DOT, and we're so glad that you're carrying through and continue to hand off your energy and level and commitment to continuous growth in our industry. So with that, John, can you help us learn a little bit about the history of ATSSA, where we've been and where we're at and where you see us headed? John, if I could turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dale. Good morning, everyone. And Chris bridged to the future and how we're going to get back together, which we all really want to do. But as she reminded us, the first how-to was in Fargo at the Doublewood Inn in 1993, and it far exceeded our vision of what that would be about. As a reminder to everyone, the North Dakota LTAP Center was a key partner in this effort, and they've continued to be a key partner with the chapter in supporting the chapter events, including the how-tos. The partnership is key to the continued success of the chapter and its members to continue to strive towards zero deaths on our highways in our region. The most recent example of this support is demonstrated by their gracious offer to host these virtual workshops during this time when we're not able to meet in person. All of us are looking forward to the spring of 2022 when we can get together once again and share our experiences, successes, and challenges that we face in improving safety on our streets and highways. It will take all of us and many more to reach the ultimate goal of zero fatalities on our transportation system. Continued success of the chapter. Let me back up one step, please. The first how-to in 1993 was held before there was a Northland chapter of ATSSA. And the success of that really spurred the industry to form the chapter in July of 1993. And as Chris mentioned, today over 500 traffic safety professionals get together at the how-to in Fargo. And it's the only chapter that's had continuous how-tos in that long a time. Continued success of this chapter in 2007 led to the chapter to establish an executive board. The reason that they did this was to ensure continued success, but it also enabled the chapter and its members to be more responsive to the needs of state and local agencies. And I'll speak to that a little bit this morning. Also in April of 2007, the members of the Northland chapter and the members of the Minnesota County Engineers Association signed a memorandum of understanding to collaborate to improve safety on our streets and highways. The Northland chapter members enjoy and appreciate the partnership that they have with the Minnesota County Engineers Association, especially the members of the Safety Committee. They continue to be the only ATSSA chapter with a formal MOU with local agencies and are enjoying the opportunities this continues to provide and working together to improve safety on our Northland streets and highways. One of our speakers this morning, Vic Lund, has been very active in the County Engineers Safety Committee and has been very active in the Northland how-to over the years. Chapter members continue to appreciate the support of members of the committee and hope that participation can continue to grow. They offer if there's any traffic safety and traffic control topics in your area, to contact them through the Northland Chapter Executive Board, any Northland member, or on their website on the Contact Us portion. Chapter members welcome any local transportation partners at any of their events and meetings. On a personal note, I think the real reason for how-tos are being so successful is that these workshops give opportunities for everyone involved in providing traffic control and safety to get together, share experiences, borrow successes, share failures, and learn from each other. It's the only venue that I'm aware of where agency managers, business owners, manufacturer technical experts, highway workers, field supervisors, and others involved in traffic safety industry get together and have meaningful discussions on how to address the real needs and opportunities in advancing traffic safety and eliminating deaths on our highways. The continued success of these efforts rests squarely on the shoulders of each and every one of us to share our knowledge and experience and our willingness to listen to others that have knowledge and experience. I have never been able to understand how fierce competitors could leave the competition at the door and sit together to address the need to eliminate fatalities and improve the lives of everyone that travel on our streets and highways. I have great admiration for everyone that I've met, and I value many of the professional and personal relationships I've been privileged to develop over the last 30 years. I wish to thank each and every one of you for your continued efforts to improve traffic safety on our streets and highways. With that, Dale, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks, John. So could we go through a few of the photos? If I could share some of the stuff that, and can you see the striping conference?
Yes, sir.
Oh, do you mind sharing a few tidbits of how we started in 1993, like you mentioned, and how has technology changed?
Well, I'll give credit to Brad Meyer, and Brad is still involved in the pavement striping industry. He had participated in a how-to in Colorado in previous years, previous to 1993, and decided it was a good idea. And it was his energy that brought this together. And at the time, Don Anderson with the North Dakota LTAP that did a lot of the advertising and registration at that time. So again, another partnership of people getting together. I participated because I was involved in pavement markings at Mndot at the time and helped to put the agenda together and brought together the industry experts, the technical experts from people that manufacture equipment, people that manufacture or produce paint and glass beads and everything, and what are the secrets of striping, and brought people together. And as Chris had mentioned, we were thinking we'd get about 70, 75 people, and we got nearly 150. It was truly a standing room only event that first year in 1993, and really energized everyone. In 1994, we moved downtown to the Civic Center, and I see, Dale, that you're popping some slides up from that event, and we focused on work zone traffic controls. And many of the people you see in these slides are no longer with us, unfortunately, but the energy that they gave to this industry and move things forward was phenomenal. Some pictures of the industry exhibits out there where we held our classroom when we just had one big classroom there at the Civic Center. It worked very well for us. And the exchange of information, which is really the important part. We like the technical things and what you learn in those presentations. I don't want to devalue those at all, but what's really important is that exchange of information and building friendships and sharing information both ways. I think that I've always learned more at these how-to events than what I've contributed to those events. In talking with people, people that are out there in the field working on the streets and highways, the steel toe boots guys that are feet on the ground, and the issues that they bring forward and listen to, and the successes that they've had in improving traffic safety on their roadways.
John, you mentioned boots on the ground. It's such a critical element for us to recognize the people that actually do the work, not that to just design the work. We're in this together, and you often talk about that boots on the ground, and can you elaborate a little bit on that, what it means at this event for those people to see what's going on and help us pick out what can be in the future?
Well, as I mentioned in my remarks, Dale, I think that's been the real success of the how-to is we bring people from all walks of life together and share information, and we value that information that everybody shares. You know, we don't have any photos here to share today, but many times we have people bring their sign trucks and their stripers and their traffic control devices and the things that they use every day to install signing and do pavement markings and improve traffic control on all the streets and highways. And so kick the tires, so to speak, and share that information. And I know everyone goes back home with good ideas on how to improve their operations and make things better. Those of us that sit in the ivory tower or in the cushioned offices, if you will, don't understand those issues. And it's really important that they bring that to the table and share that so we can move that forward also. It really takes, to steal the one, it really takes a village to make this happen.
Oh, and here's Don Anderson in this picture. Don he's just an awesome guy. He was a wonderful professor, great lead for LTAP, and as you mentioned, one of the keys to making this event happen. So cool to recognize him. Thank you for that picture, John.
Yep.
I'll click through the last pictures that you've got in it. And what we really see here is a mix of industry, of government, of people in the ivory tower, as you mentioned, as people working on the road. And that mix is, as you described, the secret to this event. So as you're listening to our recording later on, pass it on to people that may not have been here that can learn from this. And a lot of the people, you're right, you'll recognize that in this industry, it's a career. It's not a passion that flares up for a week or two or a year or two, but it's a long career, that opportunity for us. I love these photos. Tells us where we're at. So where are we headed now, John? This is back in 1994. Things have changed a little bit.
I think things have changed tremendously. The basics are just the same. You know, one of the issues that continuously comes up from people on the street, Dale, is the distracted driver issue. And how do we get after that? And how do we take care of those issues? We've had fatalities happen in work zones because drivers are distracted in looking at that. And I think the only way that we're going to get after that issue and address that is connected autonomous vehicles, ITS solutions out there that can make drivers aware of things, warn workers when things are going wrong out there. And it has to happen in a snap second to make that happen. And so that's what I've been working on, is trying to make those improvements in technology and move those things forward. Not only does it save the lives of the workers, it saves the lives of the people that are traveling through those work zones. You know, a lot of vehicles today have lane keeping and lane warning systems in them. They have adaptive cruise that prevents tailgating and those types of technologies, I think, will really help us in the industry. One of the challenges we have, I believe, in that industry, Dale, is to keep track of that and how that works and what is the role that we play as highway professionals in moving that forward. And it's changing every day, but in the time that it takes us to go through this, it will change today. It's very difficult to stay on top of that, but we need, that's a challenge that we have in the industry, to use that technology. You know, another issue is that technology moving forward. Colorado has been leading follow truck with TMA that doesn't have a worker in it. How do you save a worker's lives if that truck is hit by a large commercial vehicle? But if the worker's not there, you can save their life. And using that technology to get that worker out of that truck, not only does it improve safety, but it improves productivity of that work crew by putting another member of the crew out on the road rather than driving that shadow vehicle. Iowa had a flagger killed this summer, and I was asked directly, what do we do to save the flagger's life, to get the flagger off the road? There's automated flagger assist devices out there. There's portable signals that are readily available and move the flagger off of that highway. So if you do have an inattentive or impaired driver, they might hit a piece of equipment, but they won't kill a flagger. And very important to move that technology forward. Now, you push the right button, Dale.
Yeah. And one more button I'd like to push with you, John, is your safety tagline. I often hear you say, see something, say something. Can you share that message with us?
Absolutely, and I'll advertise tomorrow's session that I'm going to be a presenter at, and we're going to focus on work zones, but it's not just work zones. We're traffic safety professionals, and every one of us that get together, from the field worker on up to the executive, and I think that it's really our responsibility when we see something that's wrong to bring it to the attention of the right person and make sure that they understand that that's an issue that should be dealt with, and so that that issue can be dealt with. And I do that on a regular basis. Then it's not to criticize anybody's activities. It's not to criticize anyone's action. It's to make people aware of what's happening out there and what can possibly be done to make that better. And I think there's been a lot of agencies that are working very hard on that. People driving the trucks and out there snow plowing and patching the road and mowing the ditches and all the work that they do, they see these things every day. And bring those forward to your managers and talk about that and how can we improve this situation so that someone else doesn't get killed or injured out there on these highways.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. What a wonderful intro and bit of history of where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. Thank you very much. Love your safety taglines. And on behalf of the chapter, just a reminder, have your own personal safety tagline. What's yours? How do you bring that to life on the roadway? So a challenge to create your own safety tagline. Well, let's move into the next topic, and we've got an important one for saving lives, and that is compliance sign supports. MASH 350. I don't even know what that stuff is. We've got 3 subject experts that are going to help us learn, understand what that is. And we're going to start off with, we've got 3 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And we're going to start off with Minnesota, Vic Lund. Vic has 13 years of experience as traffic engineer for St. Louis County in Minnesota. He's got a Bachelor's of Science degree from Michigan Technological University in Civil Engineering and a Master's of Science degree from Iowa State in Civil Engineering with an emphasis on transportation engineering. His background includes rural and urban highway safety, intersection design, intelligent transportation systems, and the list goes on. He's got a wealth of information. What I love about Vic, one of the many things, is the way he understands topics and hands those off in a way that we can understand them. And once we understand them, we know how to apply them. So with that, Vic, I'd like to turn it over to you if you could help us learn a little bit about Minnesota and where you're headed with MASH 350.
All right, thanks, Dale, for that introduction. Let me get the presentation pulled up here. Just a second.
Perfect, it's coming.
And almost there.
And it's starting, there
okay.
You go, looks
You
good.
should be there, all right. Well, again, thanks for that, Dale. Again, my name is Vic Lund. I'm the traffic engineer for St. Louis County. We are located right on the western shore of Lake Superior. One interesting factoid about St. Louis County is we are the largest county geographically east of the Mississippi River. Not by population, but definitely by geography. So the county is about 60 miles wide by about 120 miles long, and we border Canada. So it's a interesting location. In fact, one of the things I've done before, just because I'm a nerdy engineer, is if you take St. Louis County and make a cutout to scale in Minnesota and then turn it around, the tip of St. Louis County goes down to the south side of the Twin Cities. So it's pretty big, and we're an interesting agency too. I mean, unique, I should say. We have about 3,000 miles of roadway, centerline miles, and I tell people that you can drive from Duluth to Dallas, back to Duluth, on just St. Louis County roadways. That's the extent of our system. So I'm hoping that some of that experience will help answer some questions for you today. This tagline on safety, I'm going to touch base on safety a little bit later, but believe it or not, I've been thinking about a lot of this presentation and what I want to say and how I want to say it to you folks. And I came up with these words kind of shook around in my head, actually, believe it or not, early this morning. And here's what the words shaped into my mind this morning of it. And listen carefully, I'll say it twice. We know this, that we work in a profession that directly answers the question of whether our neighbors will arrive safely at their destination. I'll say it again. We know this, that us as professionals in the traffic safety industry, we work in a profession that directly answers the question of whether our neighbors will arrive safely at their destination. So always keep that in mind as you're thinking about this topic and anything about traffic safety. Well, as the slide shows, I'm going to give a local agency perspective of traffic sign supports. And I want to give you just a quick journey or background on my journey personally. Probably up until about a couple years ago, really, I really believed myself to be in a bubble, practicing in a bubble with regards to MASH. I really didn't think it applied to me. I mean, I work for a county, a local agency. None of our roadways are on the national highway system. Our safety performance is actually pretty good, very good, I should say, with those vehicles that do hit our sign supports. Our devices are NCHRP 350 compliant. I thought, well, what's the difference, right? A couple years ago, I did attend a class, and it's a shameless plug for the National Highway Institute, but they have a great class on roadside safety, and it made me think differently. And that's the key word, it made me think differently. And that's my challenge for you this morning, is for you to understand where you are, and at least think differently. You may arrive at the same conclusion and methods of where you are today, but at least be aware of some things that you might want to be familiar with. So my focus of my presentation is ground-mounted signs. I'm not talking about the signs that are supported by I-beams or larger structures like that, cantilevers or gantry supports, but in Mndot vernacular, it's the Type C and the Type D signs. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a local agency in Minnesota, but if you're a local agency in North Dakota, South Dakota, or somewhere else, I'm convinced it's going to be beneficial for you too. So just stay with us. And again, maintaining a consistent vision of towards zero deaths is always in my background. For those that know me personally and know me professionally, I'm very passionate for traffic safety in everything, and I filter everything I think about with regards to traffic safety through TZD, the Minnesota Towards Zero Deaths Initiative. So the signs that you see on the slide really are the types of signs we're dealing with, and for a local agency, this is 98, 99, maybe 100% of your sign inventory are the signs that we're going to be talking about this morning. So the first thing I want to do is break up the presentation and think about just some basic concepts of sign supports and their performance. Then we'll talk about some standards that apply to you. Then we'll finish it up with some application. So the three types of sign supports that I think about are U-channel, square tubular, and wood post. So St. Louis County, we use the U-channel supports. I'd say 99% of our sign supports are U-channel. That's because they're soil, we're driving them into the soil. We have about 1% of our sign installation using square tubular posts. Primarily that's like concrete medians and islands and that kind of stuff where you have like a concrete surface. We can mount a base on that surface and mount the sign support. Wood post, I'm actually a native of Michigan, so I don't see much of wood posts in Minnesota, but Michigan and Wisconsin actually have quite a few wood posts in their sign inventory system. So with performance of sign posts, there's three basic characteristics of sign post performance when they're hit by a vehicle. First is the yielding type. So think of it as a vehicle hitting a sign post and the post bending over as the vehicle continues on its path. And that's typically like a U-channel post that's installed in the ground. It rises to like 12 or 24 inches above the ground. Then you have a fracturing type post. That's like typically your wood post. You'll have holes drilled in the bottom of the post to weaken it. So that way when the vehicle hits it, it's weaker at that point and it fractures near the ground surface, allowing the vehicle to continue on its path. And then lastly, you have the slip-based design. People refer to this as the omnidirectional or the multi-directional. A lot of people in their mind correlate this to MASH, and yeah, certainly it's MASH compliant, but not. And there are U-channel supports that are MASH compliant as well. But the slip-based design, think of it as a post that's driven into the ground. Excuse me, and you have a base that's about 4 inches from the top of the ground surface. That's a slip-based design, so that when a vehicle hits it, it shears at that base, and it stays at about that 4-inch height to allow the vehicle to proceed on its path. But these are the three basic types of characteristics that really, when we talk about sign supports, that you're probably going to be experiencing. This is helpful to understand this whole topic of MASH and the performance of it. Standards. Well, the first thing you ought to do if you're asking a question about signs or sign supports or anything about traffic control devices is you ought to go back to the METCD. If it isn't there, then you can go to another resource, but always make your first stop with the METCD. In Minnesota, we're one of the few states in the nation that has our own version. Obviously, a lot of it's the same as the federal version, but currently we're underneath the 2009 version of the MUTCD. And in Minnesota's version, we have this statement. It's a standard, it's a shall. So those that are familiar with the MUTCD have different levels of mandate, but this is a shall. It says post-mounted signs and object markers shall be crash worthy. Keyword crash worthy. So what does that mean? Thankfully, the MUTCD has definitions of these important terms. And the definition in the current version of the MUTCD is really more like a binary definition, meaning that you either meet something or you don't meet something. In this case, specifically, it references the NCHRP Report 350 standard. And so basically it says if your roadside appurtenance, I had to practice that word several times for today, but if your roadside appurtenance is successfully crash tested to NCHRP 350, it's considered compliant. Okay. Now, for those in our audience, you're probably familiar that there's a draft version of the MUTCD out there for comment today. I understand the comment period has been pushed back till May, so you have some more time for it. But I downloaded that draft version and looked at what is it saying about sign supports in crash worthiness. And it says the same standard language as the current version of the MUTCD. Post-mounted signs, object markers shall be crash worthy. But it changes the definition of crash worthy to a more performance-based definition. So I underline the words that directly relate to sign supports. It says the ability of a roadside safety hardware device, a sign support, that has intended to minimize the risk to vehicle occupants by allowing the vehicle to continue without significant resistance. So think of it that you're looking at more of a performance base. In other words, instead of saying it's got to be compliant with a standard, we're saying this is what we want it to do. We want the vehicle to be able to continue on its path if it runs off the roadside, and if it impacts that sign support, we want it to continue without significant resistance. The other thing to note that I found in this proposed definition is it removes specific reference to NCHRP 350 and MASH 16. But it does reference a national standard. It just doesn't necessarily call it out by name. So again, I think we're still in this, we're moving more in this era, I think, of expected performance or performance that we want to see on our roadside systems. In Minnesota, we actually have a statute, believe it or not, pertaining to placement of traffic signs in our road right-of-way. The last line, it says all traffic control devices shall conform to the state manual and specifications. What that means is the MUTCD. So the state is recognizing that the MUTCD is the standard when it comes to traffic sign installation. And I like to tell folks in my other presentations that of all the engineering manuals that we operate with, think about the AASHTO, the Green Book, think about the Highway Safety Manual, think about the Roadside Design Guide, but the MUTCD is the only one that's codified in federal and state law. So it's law, right? And so we want to make sure that we're aware of that. But it's important that it's a standard for various reasons, as we know. Then there's this joint implementation agreement between AASHTO and Federal Highway Administration. So MASH is a product of AASHTO, okay? AASHTO, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. AASHTO does not have the ability to regulate what happens on our highway systems. However, Federal Highway is our regulatory agency, and so Federal Highway and AASHTO, with this joint implementation agreement, said, look, we want to give some clarity to our agencies across the country with regards to what does MASH mean and how do they need to implement it. So there's three things to think about. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. All right, the first thing to think about is this question of you're sitting here today and really there's nothing urgent pushing you to do anything, but the first consideration says, hey, think about a process to replace your existing hardware that has not, keyword not, been successfully tested to NCHRP Report 350. So if you can think of anything on your highway system that has not been successfully tested to 350, the agreement recommends, it encourages you, hey, you should come up with a process to make those compliant to at least 350, okay? Think of it this way. About about 2 years ago here in St. Louis County, we started on a process to slowly upgrade our W-beam guardrail systems to MASH standards. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but notice a process. I mean, it's going to take time through our contracts, through our maybe dedicated guardrail projects, through our maintenance forces, but we've come up with a process to do that. So ultimately, we'll have MASH compliant W-beam guardrail systems. The same thing here. I mean, you would think about for those systems that are not NCHRP 350 compliant, just think about a process that you can do, different avenues that you can do to make those compliant. The second thing to think about is if you have a device that's hit or damaged, let's say it's hit by a vehicle, a sign support that's run over by a car. It says when it becomes damaged beyond repair, you're encouraged to upgrade it to a system that complies with MASH 16. So it specifically says in this case, if you have a damaged item, damaged system, we're recommending that you actually upgrade that one specifically to a MASH 16 item. Now keep in mind, these are recommendations, okay? I think there's value in these recommendations, but you as an agency will ultimately have to employ your engineering judgment and say what is best for our agency, both balancing the risk, but as well as your ability to maintain and implement and own these types of systems. The last thing to think about with this agreement is this is the key part of it, is which roadways does MASH apply to. And it says specifically contracts on the National Highway System with a letting date after these dates below shall be conformance to MASH. And specifically on the December 31st, 2019 date, you can see sign supports in there. And so basically what that says is that for projects on the National Highway System after December 31st, 2019, they need to be MASH compliant. As an example, the Minnesota Department of Transportation on that date, so January 1st, 2020, said as a department-wide policy, they said everything is going to be MASH compliant. And that's totally permissible. You're not required to do that, but it's totally permissible. It makes it a lot easier from a maintenance standpoint, so you don't have to say, okay, well, a contract, we're going to do this. My maintenance forces are going to do that. And then you end up with these conflicting things out in the system. And it's best to try to unify that as much as possible. Really, you got to be thinking about maintenance and for your crews so that they can readily respond and easily maintain those systems. So, what's a local agency to do? Or any agency for that matter, but I'll try to answer it from a local agency perspective. So the question I would ask you to first answer is any portion of your roadway network on the National Highway System? So in St. Louis County, we have 3,000 miles of roadway. We have about 1.25 miles that's on the National Highway System. And that's a road that accesses the Duluth International Airport, and that's the only reason it's on the NHS. But otherwise, 2,999 miles of our system are not on the NHS. So technically speaking, MASH is not a regulated requirement on our roadway system. Now I want to be careful here. I am not minimizing the value of MASH. I am not dissuading you from saying that MASH should be placed on your systems or portions of it. What I am saying is thinking about what is necessary. Think about it this way. If you are proficient with the METCD, you should be able to understand which signs are required and which signs are recommended and which signs are an option. So for example, stop signs are not required. You do not have to install a stop sign. However, if you install an always stop configuration, an always stop placard is required. So you got to understand, this is part of that mastery and proficiency, right? And it helps you in those decisions and policy developments when you understand these requirements. So that's my intention here, is to help you understand that requirement of where it applies and where it doesn't apply. Okay. So if you don't have any roadways on the NHS, so for example, you would not be required technically to install MASH compliant devices in your highway contracts. Now be careful. There may be policies that are implemented locally in your state that says, for example, in Minnesota, I'll use this as an example. We have the Minnesota State Aid Division, which is our funding agency for distributing federal funds to us as counties and cities. So maybe state aid at some point is going to say, hey, you know, we want to implement this policy to have MASH compliant devices on these federal aid projects. Totally possible. My point is just be aware of that as a policy. It could be a trap for you in the future. So don't, just because it's not required per the agreement between FHW and AASHTO doesn't mean it's not required at your state or local level. And then also in terms of upgrading your devices today, really let's talk about basics again. The METCD, the current version, says NCHRP Report 350 is a standard for crash worthiness. So if your devices are NCHRP Report 350 compliant, technically you're good to go right now. And I would say that as a local agency, your goal ought to be at least 350, and then you ought to be at least thinking about things to do with MASH. And this is where my pivot point is, underlined and bolded, because I want to pivot to what I'm trying to get to. Just because you're not required to doesn't mean you shouldn't try to. Just because you're not required to doesn't mean you should not try to. So some things to think about. This is where it comes in to think differently. Research sign support options that are compliant with 350 or MASH. I mean, do the work. Think about it. Attend a class. Doing what you're doing today. This is a great first step. But figuring out what options are available to you. That is in itself a very valuable thing, because you may find something out there that's like, hey, this makes a lot of sense and I wasn't aware of it. I'm glad we did the research. Number two, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to do a wholesale change to your methods. So just because MASH is floating out there doesn't mean all of a sudden you have to start installing exclusively square tubular posts, for example. It doesn't mean that you have to do a wholesale change. You may be looking at maybe marginal changes or on the periphery or something of that with your maintenance methods. For larger signs, I would recommend that you consider switching to a stronger post or like an I-beam support or a wood post. For example, we have some national highways, national forest places here in St. Louis County and some national parks, and those signs tend to get pretty big, those brown recreation signs. And I hate to say it, but I'm just going to be honest with you. We're using U-channel supports, and it looks like a spider web of sign supports holding up those signs. That is definitely not crash tested. In fact, I've just had recent conversations with our sign supervisors saying, well, number one, the signs are fading. Number two, we need to get those signs off those U-channels with those untested A-frame supports and moving to a more compliant support like an I-beam, something like that. So that's something to think about for your larger structures. And now for these A-frame structures. Some people call them back braces, but this is a classic Minnesota design. It's been around for a long time. You can see them all over the state, even today. Now, I'm referencing the roadside design guide, not MASH here, but in the roadside design guide, it specifically calls out and says diagonal bracing should be avoided. Okay, and the reason for that is because it's unknown how it would perform if it's hit by a vehicle from behind. Nobody knows. And it might be different in every single instance. And so you're looking at this image on the bottom right, that's the behind of the sign or the back side of the sign. So if a vehicle were to hit the back side of that sign there, we're not sure exactly how that sign support system would interact with that vehicle. And because it's an unknown, this is my strong recommendation to all the local agencies out there, and even to myself, which we're having discussions on this, of at a minimum looking about removing your A-frame supports or your back supports like that and coming up with a different way of doing it. For example, maybe increasing the number of U-channel, or whatever type of support you're using, U-channel, square tubular posts, but increasing the number of vertical posts on that panel. Maybe coming up with a stronger post, right? Also think about this. If you have a sign policy, which I strongly encourage you to get one, lots of resources out there on how to write a sign policy and examples. But if you have a sign policy, that's a great place to tuck in a policy statement about A-frame structures like this. And just to recognize this is something that we are aware of as an agency. So for long-term succession planning for future staff people, as well as maybe liability concerns, it's clearly placed out there what your agency would do. All right, we'll finish up with questions to consider and some resources, and then I'm done. So I hope not to burst your bubble, but my intention today is not to tell you what to do or give you specific recommendations of what to do. My intention today is to feed you some information that you can chew and digest and think about and come to and employ your engineering judgment and come to the best decision that you think is right for your agency. Okay, some people may think I'm feeding you meat and bones. Well, you can at least eat the meat and spit out the bones, at a minimum, right? So here's some questions to think about. Again, is any portion of your roadways network, your agency's roadway network, on the NHS? And we've talked about that a little bit, but basically, again, It helps you understand what you're required to do at a minimum. And again, you may choose to proceed into a full MASH compliant system. I would totally support that. Just be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. But that's the first question to ask, though, is what is a minimum requirement for me as a local agency or as an agency in general? Number 2, does your agency currently have a policy regarding sign support? So maybe a previous staff person who's now retired said, you know what, we're going to be doing X with regards to our sign supports, and be aware of that and understand why that policy is there. Maybe it's still review it, maybe it's good and keep it in place, maybe it needs revisions. Maybe you need to develop a policy statement with regards to sign supports. Again, thinking about adding that to your sign policy. What about your safety performance? I've been at St. Louis County for over 13 years now, and we've had several vehicles hit traffic signs. I am not aware of any vehicle any of those crash events that has resulted in injuries or deaths. I'm aware of them all being property damage only. So with that, that's good information, good knowledge, because I can then defend what we're doing and say, look, our safety performance is good. I mean, if our safety performance was bad, I would suggest that we ought to be doing something different. But having that knowledge of our safety performance is really informative on making a policy decision. How is your agency's sign maintenance crew set up today? Our crew is set up for U-channel post installation. That's the equipment, that's the tools we have. Our sign technicians are trained on installing using a U-channel sign support. So it's not impossible to switch to a completely different sign support system, but understand that there may be some challenges or cost or time period to get your tools switched over, to get your staff trained appropriately, because if they switch to a different type of sign support system, U-channel to square tubular post, there are some significant differences there. Just be aware of that. I'm not distinguishing one or the other as bad or good, but just be aware of those as you're thinking about how your sign maintenance forces could employ that and maintain those systems. Are you in a wind-prone region or not? Obviously, you would know if you are, especially if you're in western and southern Minnesota or the Dakotas. But in northeastern Minnesota, we're really not. And so we can get away with smaller or thinner sign panels. We can get away with less sign support structure than you folks can. But be aware of that, and because that's going to play into your decision making on the type of sign support system you pick for your agency. Last 2 questions. Are you a rural, or what's your rural or urban split on your roadway network? If you're a Reuben, I had a Reuben sandwich the other day. If you're a rural county or a rural agency, you're probably doing a lot of soil installations. So that may have an influence on you. If you're an urban agency, you may have a lot of hard surfaces like concrete and stuff. So you may want to tend to go to another specific type of sign support, like a square tubular post with a base breakaway or something like that. And then finally, what's the volume of your sign inventory system, or your total sign inventory? Well, St. Louis County, we have 40,000 signs in total that we maintain. So that's a big ship to turn. I mean, we're a big ship with a small rudder, and it takes a long time to turn us in those regards. So, but if you're a smaller agency, let's say less than 1,000 signs, it might be a lot more feasible for you to say, you know what, we're going to switch over to X or go to Y. It's much more feasible in that case to move in that direction, maybe. All right, this is my last slide. Some resources. I understand this presentation is going to be available for download after the fact, so don't necessarily worry about writing down these URLs. But there's some good resources here for you to think about. The first one and the last one are the ones I want to call your attention to. The first one is the Roadside Safety Pool Fund for MASH implementation. It is a great practical resource showing actual devices and systems that have been MASH tested successfully and unsuccessfully. And you can filter out through a querying mechanism on the webpage. But you can actually go there and specifically look at sign support options that are available. It shows U-channel supports that are MASH compliant. It shows square tubular post systems that are MASH compliant. You can go there and find actual pictures and designs for you to think about. The last one is the Mndot approved qualified products list. There's actually a Mndot maintains this approved list like a menu of sorts, but specifically for sign products, it gives approved soil bases for square tubular posts, And so if you're curious about what options that Minnesota DOT is doing or other agencies might be doing for soil installations for square tubular post, you can actually go to that URL and find the approved soil bases, at least in Mndot's mind. So with that, I'm done. I think I'm hopefully done on time, maybe a few minutes early. And I'll turn it back to you, Dale. Thank you very much.
Wow, Vic, as always, what a great way to hand off information. So at the intro, mentioned how you hand information off. You do it so well. You know, in industry, no matter what our role is, we use acronyms, we use different terms that may not resonate with the rest of our team. They may not resonate with the public. And what Vic has showed us are many ways to show those so that we don't embarrass people, so that we educate them. And educated people, again, whether it's our team or the public, help us make better decisions. So the one example that I like, Vic, no acronyms, you nailed that, you really did well. And the example was 3,000 miles. Sounds funny, but that's something simple. People really can't visualize how far that is from St. Louis County, Duluth, down to Dallas, was it? And then back. That now resonates. I now have this picture of the country, and boom, boom, that's a lot of miles in one county. Even though it's big, that's an awful lot of miles. And so share messages that help people learn. Perfect. Now, the other thing that I really liked what you talked about, and John, maybe you can jump in the maintenance crews. John, if you could help lead with Vic, what do you see in the rest of the state for mixing of different styles, is it MASH, is it 350? John, if you would.
Yeah, I think, I have a question for Vic. So it's dangerous, Vic, so I'll just warn you in advance. But you had mentioned that an agency should have a signing policy. And I think you gave a lot of good food for thought on what that policy should contain and why it should be that way. And first question is, are you thinking about changing your policy in St. Louis County based on MASH 16? And the second part of that question is, when you do that, when you consider that, do you ask your sign maintenance people what their thoughts are? I think you had mentioned at one point in time that you were talking to them about certain sign structures in your presentation. And I think it's really key that people understand that when you put that policy together, not to do that in a vacuum. Could you speak to that, Vic?
Two great points. With regards to speaking to my maintenance folks, absolutely I do. Look, I'm a registered professional engineer, but that only goes so far. I rely tremendously on my sign supervisors and even my sign technicians, because they are the ones that are out there every day, and they're the ones learning what works and doesn't work on a practical basis. So for example, when we put together our current sign policy that we have today, it took about a 4 or 5 month process where we sat down in one of our conference rooms for about an hour or 2 hours every other week or every other week. But we had our sign folks present. They were part of the discussion. So I think it's extremely important to know and to have that communication with your sign folks. Specifically, I think the other question was mixing support systems, maybe a U-channel versus a square tubular post. Here's what we're going to do as an agency. We're going to be staying with the U-channel support system. However, the difference I think we're going to be seeing coming up is, for us, is removing those A-frame supports and doing other types of support systems for those signs panels that maybe are the medium size, 20 to 50 square feet size or something like that. That's really, I think, the big change that we're going to be coming up with. But in terms of the U-channel, we're going to stay with U-channel universally, except for those urban locations where we have those hard surfaces.
Another thing that you passed on, this is a first great step. I love that. Continuous learning. You handed off a lot, but this is a mammoth field, an awful lot to pick up. Keep learning. The NHI tip that you gave us for that class, wonderful, and I'm sure that you've got other training in state. Continue to learn, continue to promote your full team's learning. That's that full gamut of staff members that have to know. I just picture myself in a sign crew right now with all of the different attributes, from the the high tension cable to all of the different signpost mounts and all that they have to manage and maintain and understand. We need to really help them, as you're laying out, figure out a process that protects the public, recognizes the risk, and yet at the same time makes them efficient at what they're doing. So really like that.
Thanks.
Your tagline on "We know this," that our profession directly answers the question of our neighbors making it home, right? And I like that because it puts the burden on us. We have an onerous job. We have a heavy burden. We have there's a lot on our shoulders to get our neighbors home for that towards Vision Zero, right? But we're capable, and together, when we all know what's going on, we can make that happen. It is our wonderfully so responsibility to help people get home. Not that they were going 3 miles over the speed limit and, oh, well, that's just the way it is. That incident happened because of that. No, we need to take accountability, responsibility, understand systems, and apply those new processes. So I love that too. John, other items that you'd like to, one more, if you would.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot, Dale, because I think, you know, some agencies are well ahead of the curve on this and others maybe not even aware, and it's not a criticism. It's what training is available to local agencies on sign supports and things, and to bring people to that level. And along that line, Vic, I'll put you on the spot one more time, are you available to those local agencies to maybe steer, not do work for them, but to steer them in the direction of where these resources might help them?
Well, I'll jump on that real quick first, Dale. Yes, I'm always willing to be a partner, a mentor, whatever it may be. I always give an open invitation to everybody I speak with. Follow up with me, certainly. I mean, obviously, I got some stuff going on my own plate, but I'm passionate about the topic, and because of that passion, I want to help you on your journey.
That is so awesome, and that carries forward to others, John. Let's start at the DOT. We have experts that are in every DOT and so wanting to help. So we start there. Then we go into the local arena, and we've got the contractors and suppliers. They're experts. Tap into them. We've got our neighbors in other counties, other states. Our peers. They're wonderful. And then I'll end with the LTAPs in each state. We have classes on this, and like Vic, we're on call. We're ready to help you at a moment's notice. So there are people to help. Hope that answers the question, John.
All right. Yeah, it does, Dale. It's just good to make everyone aware that there are resources available. They're not alone in this.
Well said. We're not alone. We can't, not individually, none of us can know it all. We need to tap into others. Thank you. Vic, wonderful job as always. Great to have you. If you'd stick with us at the end of the session, there may be questions for all three states.
Good.
So next up, the great state of North Dakota. And we can say that because we're in North Dakota and we're hosting it. So there's three great states. But next up is the great state of North Dakota. And with us, we have three individuals from the North Dakota DOT. First, James Rath is with DOT. He's grew up in rural North Dakota, right outside of Grand Forks, graduated from the University of North Dakota in 1993 with a bachelor's in civil engineering. And he worked in consulting industry prior to starting with the DOT in 1998. He began with the design division and since then, in 2007, became a program manager. James oversees roadway design and traffic safety teams. Along with him will be Brian Fuchs. Brian is the assistant local government engineer for the North Dakota DOT. Brian is an unbelievable advocate for local government. Thank you, Brian. As always, thank you very much. And is a graduate from NDSU. So we've got UND, our two schools, UND and NDSU, our two Eastern schools. He's a registered professional engineer, and Brian worked previously for a consulting engineer for 3 years, and now with the North Dakota DOT for 19 years. He's worked in materials and research, local government, again, a couple great advocates. In the background, you don't see Doug Schumacher. Doug's in the back as one of our technical experts, so that as we get questions at the end of their presentation, we'll be sure to tap into Doug too. So with that, James, if you could kick us off and help us learn a little bit about MASH and 350 in North Dakota.
All right, thanks, Dale. I'm going to talk about compliant sign supports, MASH 2016 or NCHRP report 350, and then we also have some bonus material on some guardrail. And as Brian said, or as Dale said, Brian, he's in the county arena. I'm in the state area. Doug Shoemaker is our traffic safety expert. I'm really kind of filling in the gap today, I'd say, but over the years, I'm Doug's supervisor. Over the years, both Doug and his team have educated me on traffic safety. And if I were to have a tagline for the presentation, I'd just say safety is a responsibility in all of our jobs. So what is MASH? It's actually the manual for assessing safety hardware, and it presents uniform guidelines for crash testing on permanent and temporary safety features. And it's for those devices that are located in the clear zone. And just an overview of MASH, there's different test levels, and test levels 1 through 3 address your cars and pickups, and then test level 4 adds the single unit truck, which is shown in the bottom right corner, and then test level 5 through 6 includes all the above plus tractor trucks. So as those test levels increase, you'll see some of those barriers get higher. In 1993, NCHR report 350 replaced the NCHR report 230, and the North Dakota Department of Transportation adopted that shortly after that. In 2009, MASH was introduced, but the Mndot did not implement it at that time. And then in 2016, that's the MASH 16, that's when that was rolled out. And it was named because there's changes in the vehicle fleet since 350 in 1993. And it is required on newer reconstruction projects on the NHS, as it was mentioned in the previous presentation. So it's not mandated, I guess, across all the systems. So, but the Mndot implemented it on all state highway systems, beginning with projects constructed in 2018. And the way we implemented it is on our lesser strategies, more of our, I call them minor rehabilitation strategies. We said that we're going to move up our minimums on those from 230 up to 350. So if you have a compliant device that meets 350 on a minor rehabilitation project, we would leave that device in place if it's compliant. If it's not compliant with 350, then we would look at updating it to MASH, when MASH is available. And then for major rehab projects or reconstruction projects, we see more of the major widening or blending of the pavement. Those are the type of projects where we would look at bringing everything up to MASH if it's available. And I think in the previous presentation too, I think you saw the different timelines that Federal Highway set out. And what's different with Mndot is we said if it's available, we're going to implement it beginning with 2018 construction. So that took care of, that's kind of simplified things. And then for work zones, existing devices that meet 350, they can be used, if they're still serviceable. So, 10 years from now, you have a device, a portable concrete barrier that is still serviceable. We would still allow it. We didn't set a hard date. We believe that there's still value in those devices, and and that complies with Federal Highways guidance. MASH devices are allowed, of course. So in 2018, Federal Highway asked that each state provide a letter on their process for determining the crash worthiness, and NDDOT's process is, number one is if we have a federal eligibility letter that states it's in compliance with MASH, then we would accept that. And then number two is sometimes we may not have a letter, but we do have, maybe they've successfully tested it under the MASH criteria, or under an ISO 17025 accredited lab. We would also accept that. But if we don't have either one of those, then we would revert back to 350. So that would be our minimum. And then sign supports on the state system. We continue to use the same system that meets 350 today. We got the accessory squared base, and we also have the breakaway coupling system used on pipe and H-pile systems. And primarily the advantage there is it's a uniform inventory. It's pretty helpful with maintenance. So sign supports that comply with MASH. There is one, the MASH 400 system. That's a 4-inch square tube by accessory squared. Now you can see the examples on the right. We have installed a couple of them. They're probably not real competitive with perforated tube. They do require a concrete foundation for the MASH 400, whereas our perforated tube does not require that concrete foundation. They're probably more applicable where smaller round pipe or smaller H-pile are used. We haven't made a decision to fully implement this. If there was a decision to do that, we'd have to update our design procedures. That would also have an effect in the sign shops, big increase in parts inventory. So all of those things would need to be considered before moving forward with that one. The wood posts that need MASH, they're not used because with the shorter life than metal. The U-post, in North Dakota anyway, historically we've had problems with signs wobbling, causing them to come down with the high winds. Also, increase the shop inventory. Mailboxes, we still use our V-lock that meets 350. There are a number of them that comply with MASH, but most of them were tested with concrete foundations, and it's just a lot easier to drive in a post than to bring out a ready-mix truck to do a concrete foundation. Concrete bridge barriers. In North Dakota, we've implemented the Texas single slope bridge rail, and we use that on newer reconstruction bridges or deck replacements, and it meets MASH TL4, and it has a height of 36 inches. We use 38 to count for future overlays. It's designed using MASH loading. The 32-inch jersey barrier is pretty common in North Dakota prior to this. It does meet MASH TL3, but it doesn't meet MASH TL4. It does meet 350 TL4, and again the TL4, that's that single unit truck. And conversations with Fed Highway, they highly recommended going with a minimum of TL4 for bridges. So we we continued that same philosophy where before we had our bridges meet 350 TL4, which the 32-inch barrier did. But now the 32-inch barrier doesn't need TL4. That's why we moved up to the single slope, which needs MASH TL4. But we still use the 32-inch Jersey barrier if we're extending a like system, for example. We just don't use them like on a new bridge. And then the Alaska 2-tube, in 1998, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, North Dakota partnered for that testing. And we currently use a retrofit version of this Alaska 2-tube that you'll see on a lot of our bridges. And that meets 350. Texas Transportation Institute, they have a new version that complies with MASH testing for new installation I'll talk about in a minute. And our goal is to have that real retrofit that would meet MASH. So in 2019, the Alaska 2-tube was successfully passed MASH TL4 for new installations. And I'll just show you a video. I thought it was kind of interesting on just a visually you can see this is a particular crash test that was done, and they check for a number of things. And one of the things is redirecting the truck so it doesn't go over the bridge. So I'll show you that video here. So you can see it redirected that truck. It didn't go over the side of the rail. And there's other things too, of course, that they check for to make sure it complies. So the next thing would be what we're interested in on the state highway system is having them do a numeric simulation for the rail retrofit, and then we could bump up our rail retrofits from 350 to MASH. And then it also increases the height from 32.5 inches to 36 inches to comply with that TL4 and capture that single unit truck. And then back to the new, when it's installed in a new system, they do have a Thri-beam transition that's compliant with MASH TL3. And it's installed on steel poles. So, if you're a county and another state and you want to use on a brand new bridge, the Alaska 2-tube, you can install it using on a new system today. And then I'm going to hand this off to Brian, talk about Lpa requirements and Guardrail.
Alrighty, thanks, James. A lot of good presentations so far today from Vic, telling us what their local agency does as far as MASH, Guardrail, and other things with science supports. So, as Vic and James have pointed out, MASH requirements are required on the NHS system, and we made that move across the state as a whole as far as on the state system to move to MASH. So for anything that comes through this office on the local system, it needs to meet at least NCHRP 350. Now, obviously, we would encourage folks to move to MASH where appropriate and everything. And like Vic said, they only have a mile or 2 miles on the NHS system within their county. And county-wide for North Dakota, we have about 2 miles on the NHS system that would be applicable, and I don't think we have anything more than signs on that. And our 2 miles goes from US 2 up to the Grand Forks Air Force Base. That's on the NHS system. However, you also got to be aware of that within urban areas, that there are areas that are in the NHS system that would need to comply with MASH. So if you are working in an urban area, it is something to be aware of, to check to make sure that if it's on the AHS system, that anything you do there would need to be upgraded to MASH where applicable for that. You know, so I know James, his group, you know, they work on standard drawings as well. So as things are moved to MASH, you know, for the state system, you know, we will have some standard drawings that will comply with MASH and will be changed from time to time based on certain details. So inherently, any local agency that is using our standards on plans, whether they come through my shop or anything that they do on their own, if they're using our standards, you know, they may be getting MASH compliant hardware out there, guardrails, things like that. So that is something to be aware of. We certainly encourage everybody to move to MASH, but I understand that certain agencies may not have the funds to have different inventory, things like that. But again, local agencies is not required to move to MASH unless you are have anything on the NHS system. So bridge rail, guardrail, I know this is a big topic that comes up for us, is the most thing that comes up for us. And that's because, you know, typically we don't have a lot of guardrail out there. You know, we don't have traffic lights, anything like that on the local system within North Dakota, especially in the rural areas. So the bridge rail and guardrail is a big thing that comes up. So on the local system, you know, we are requiring anything that comes through this office with federal aid to be NCHRP 350 TL3 or higher. You know, it is nice to see that the Alaska 2-tube guardrail, or excuse me, the bridge rail passed MASH TL4, because I know the counties, if they do end up putting a bridge in, they do not like using Jersey barriers due to snow. So that is good news that they can now move to that standard and it will be MASH compliant and everything. And then also the guardrail, you know, coming off those bridges, we want to ensure that those meet NCHRP 350 TL3 as well. You know, you may have some areas that have lower speed than out on a rural road. Again, you know, you should look at those test standards to make sure that you are getting what you need to as far as speed in vehicles and stuff like that in different areas. You know, with regard to bridge rail and guardrail, I know there's a lot of local agencies that are installing prefab bridges from True North Steel, and there's other manufacturers that do that. You know, and they do put bridge rail out there and everything, but you know, make sure that when you do that, you specify what requirements you want that bridge rail to meet, because they can put out there a bridge rail that might meet a TL2 rating, but you know, it doesn't meet a TL3 or TL4 rating. So you need to make sure you specify what bridge rail needs to meet for specifications out there. And the other thing is, you know, a lot of those bridges, you know, they come out and they just, you know, there's no guardrail that is attached to them. We certainly recommend that you install that guardrail, because not only will that protect that vehicle and occupants from the feature that you're crossing, but it also protects them from that spearing that could happen at those bridge rails, because a lot of those bridges that come out, you know, they have a W-beam that sticks out there, and if a vehicle hits that, that's not, you know, they're just going to spear that vehicle. So make sure that you add guardrail to those bridge rails as well, and specify the testing level that you want on that bridge rail to make sure you get what you need to for your traffic that's out there, and also the speed that's out there, because those testing requirements vary with vehicles and speed and angles. So make sure you specify what you actually want out there to protect the people out there. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to James.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Brian. And in our presentation, we also have some links in here. Our guardrail expert did a presentation last year. It's got some of the same slides that were in this one, but it's got a number of more additional information in here you can look into. We put in a couple of standard drawings on our website for end terminals that meet MASH. And then also we've got, you know, just a link to our standard drawings in general, and also a link to the MASH pooled fund. those are some of the links. And then we also have some contact information, for myself and Brian and Doug. And I guess I said earlier, Doug, he's our traffic safety engineer. He's our expert. That'd probably be your first person to go to for questions. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dale.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you, Brian. So James, you started off with a perfect add-on to what John talked about in history of the ATSSA How-To Conference, and that is sharing the knowledge, paying it forward, right? You shared that Doug had taught you and others had taught you, and what that means. And certainly as we develop and grow in our careers, that's the exciting part, to really, that passion deepens and we get to share. So kudos to recognizing that and adding on your safety tagline, that the responsibility is ours. It's in all of our jobs. We can't be shedding that responsibility. We need to take it inside. So love your tagline. And then on the snow and wind end, boy, both Brian, you and James talked about a different end of the spectrum than Vic did, where there's not as much wind in the Duluth area. So our U channels tend to make signs wobble a little bit and might fracture the sign and not perform. And then certainly with that bridge treatment, wow, I love the Alaskan 2-tube. So that system, thank you for pointing that out. There's a little bonus to our sign support presentation topic. So love those two. John, we have time for one more question, if you could.
I think just to comment on this one, Dale, and that is that to show the difference between, the forests of northeastern Minnesota where there's not much wind and the prairie of North Dakota, and a system that works very well in Minnesota in those areas doesn't work well out in the prairie. And I think everyone has to be aware of that. The situations that they're under require difference. There's not a recipe card for any of this. Thank you.
Oh, you're so spot on. Thank you. And if you'd stay on, and we'll tap into you for questions at the end, please. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you both. And next up is our great state of South Dakota. How do you like that, Christina? Great state of South Dakota. The Dakotas, man, we're joined at the hips. I don't even know why there's a north and a south. We are so much alike. But next up, we've got Christina that's going to share a bit about what their state and local viewpoint on MASH and 350 is. Christina's got her bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from South Dakota State University. She is a registered professional engineer with South Dakota. Began working with the South Dakota DOT in 2008. She is currently the South Dakota DOT Operations Traffic Engineer, a position she's held since 2013. I'd like to point out a few of the roles that she has in the AASHTO subcommittee and on traffic engineering. She's the chair of ProWAG. That's the pedestrian facility and public rights of ways. Those are our ADA rules and those guidelines that we have. And Ron Eck, if you're online, Ron from West Virginia, you're going to love that. You already know that Christina is serving in that capacity. And then other national boards. Bringing it local, Christina is also on, as Chris mentioned, on the Northland Chapter ATSSA board. So one more thing, Christina also lives and breathes the MUTCD. If you didn't know that, now you do. So if you want an expert on the MUTCD and the new rules that are coming out, she's well versed. So with that, Christina, share a bit about South Dakota's view.
Thank you, Dale, for the nice introduction. And yes, while that NPA is out for the MUTCD right now, it's something I look at every single day. So May 14th can't come soon enough for me, but hopefully we have a good new addition. I'm going to share my PowerPoint here.
Looks good.
All right. So yeah, as mentioned, I am the operations traffic engineer for the South Dakota Department of Transportation. And there you kind of have our tagline, which is better lives through better transportation. And of course, a key aspect of that is safety. So at South Dakota, I thought I would just cover how we're approaching MASH for sign supports. Right now, we do have on our website, there's an approved products page, which gives some information there on our process for MASH, some links to documents. You can see our link to our process for approving items as MASH crashworthy, and also some information on work zone or temporary traffic control MASH devices, where we have some service lives and other information there. So there's a link there. So if you get a recording of this, hopefully you can go down, but if you're on the South Dakota Department of Transportation and can find our doing business certification and then approved products page, it'll give you the information. So our process for determining MASH crash worthiness right now is that we're going to take submittals on products for anything that someone wants to submit that we would accept as MASH crash worthy. One of the first things we'll look for, of course, is if they have a federal aid eligibility letter from FHWA. FHWA has said that they're not providing these anymore, but they have done some for MASH devices. So we'll look for that, but it's not a requirement, of course. But we would be looking through crash test results. So any proprietary hardware, we want to be crash tested at an accredited crash test laboratory that's independent of the manufacturer. And then any crash test videos, the reports, the in-service performance information, detailed drawings, installation guidelines, specific use requirements and specifications, all of that gets provided. And then we have a group within DOT that will take on reviewing that information. We determine then whether we feel that hardware complies with the crashworthy requirements after a review of that. We have internal groups set up. I chair anything that comes in under traffic hardware, setting up the internal review group. If we then determine that hardware is crashworthy and meets our needs, it may be used on the national highway system. And Vic, I think, did a great presentation explaining the requirements of MASH for the national highway system, and encouraging checking it out for those local roadways as well. But ours would, of course, meet the requirements for the national highway system. And then anything that does get approved, we'll monitor the performance of that through review of any crash reports or other information that comes in on how they're performing in the field. So we could determine later, perhaps, that it's not appropriate for installation on the national highway system. I haven't come across this, of course, yet, but it's just in case, because there's a lot of responsibility put on the states now to determine, what's crashworthy for our clear zones. So you always want to be monitoring that field performance. If the South Dakota DOT determines that non-proprietary hardware is crashworthy and it meets our needs, then we would create either a standard plate or include it in specifications wherever appropriate, so that those can be incorporated in plans. It's kind of like the generic type 3 barricades that were approved under NCHRP 350. That would be an example of a non-proprietary hardware. It was a general design that could be included. So going forward in MASH, if there are those devices, then we would use that. Proprietary would be the ones that are manufactured by a specific brand or company. In rare circumstances, and as an alternative to any of those procedures that I just went through, we may determine crashworthiness based on in-service performance. So that might be conducted through the pooled fund studies or other research projects or NCHRP reports. So that is also a possibility. I know there are some items. We have representatives on the Midwest Research Pooled Fund Study, and we've submitted some items to maybe be looked at for MASH. But what are we doing today? Right now, our current specifications, pretty much any flat aluminum signs, so those standard signs that Vic pointed out, like the stop signs, your route marker signs, the smaller size, they don't need to be on an I-beam. We go with 2-inch perforated square tube steel posts or the 2.5 inch, depending on the design loads. The 2.5 inch is all put on a slip base. And so that's for the majority of those signs. We'll also put square tube post onto a clean breakaway base if we're mounting it into concrete. And that's our mechanism for that. We used to have a lot of wood posts across the state, but we've done away with that. Our 2015 specifications, we removed wood posts, and we've been slowly replacing all of those installations with the perforated square steel tube posts. We do use U-channel yet for delineators and object markers that are installed into the inslope in the ground. So right now, we do not have, here's a picture of the slip bases that we set them on. Right now, we don't have anything that's officially been approved as MASH, but the documentation has been submitted to me on a perforated square steel tube post system. So hopefully we won't have to make a lot of changes when we formally can get our internal group through that documentation and determine if it's MASH crash worthy. Then we will create an approved products list for this, and it'll be specifically called the MASH sign supports. And then whatever devices that we determine meet this criteria will be added to that. At that time, once we have an approved device, we would incorporate that into plans. And instead of accepting, NCHRP 350 items, we could go to requiring MASH for new installations. Obviously, what's in the field will remain. It's all NCHRP 350 crash worthy. So those will be used for the rest of their service life. And that is what I had on MASH crash-worthy signs. There's my contact information there. I can be contacted anytime, or there is a link through our approved products page if anyone wants to submit a product for that, and those will make their way to me through those channels. So with that, Dale, if you had any questions, let me know. Finally, stop sharing the screen. There we go.
Perfect. Christina, thank you. Great presentation. And I do like the South Dakota's doing it. And you're right, in North Dakota too, we use the U channel for our delineators and some of the object markers and stuff like that. So that's a good mix. It's a good utilization of material. Like that an awful lot. And your state safety tagline. Oh my goodness. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. John, comments, questions?
The only one I have, and Christina, you'll have to forgive me if I missed something, but MASH 16 for temporary work zone devices. You mentioned the type 2 barricade, but how about portable sign supports and those types of things? Could you give us a little quick update there?
Yeah, sure. We've set some normal service lives through our department on devices like this. We haven't officially recognized any portable sign support type devices as MASH crash worthy at this point. I think some maybe exist out there. I haven't gotten any formal submittals on those to look into whether they would work. So right now, any device that was NCHRP 350 crash worthy for like the roll-up sign stands, those are still in play. And then for any ground mounted breakaway supports, we do allow U-channel for the temporary installations under 350. It might be a time soon, where we move to perforated square steel tube posts for the temporary installations. But those would also take into account with the work zone traffic control devices. It's different because traffic control companies have a large store of these materials. They do not become the DOTs when they're used on a construction project. They remain the use of that property or that traffic control company so that they can use them multiple times over and over. So we can't say one day, okay, now all temporary signs have to be on square tube. nuts to your warehouse full of U channel that you use here, buy all new stuff. So that's why we have to set a normal service life, and I believe we'd have 10 years once we get a crash where the MASH approved sign support for that application. Then we would say, okay, for 10 years, you would still be able to use up the rest of the service life you have on anything in your inventory, and you would have that time to kind of transfer over to what we're going to require.
Thank you, great answer.
The bigger question, what color is your jacket?
The jacket is green. Yes, I logged into the event in a pink shirt. Then I tried to change and get like the safety yellow green, but it wasn't really going. So then I threw on my green Thumper Pond jacket in hopes that our summer planning meeting is going to be in person. And so we can get together and plan out a great how-to conference for 2022.
Awesome. And I've got the green on, not Irish, but let's celebrate our differences because together we do good things. So your tagline, I said I liked it, but better lives through better transportation. I should have said it too. So I like the South Dakota tagline. Let's keep using it. Everyone, again, a challenge to create your own tagline, create your company, your own personal for our agenda. You'll see that our tagline for North Dakota LTAP right now is save a sign, save a life. And it's our strong push to advocation to have better directional information that the driver can process in that towards Vision 00 deaths initiative. So John, is comments that you might have to help us bring this up or wrap this up or for the panelists?
I don't have any direct comments or questions for the panelists, Dale, just to say that I learned a lot. Now I'm going to have to go back and do some real work. I learned something from everyone here today, and I hope that everyone did. And I would just encourage those that aren't online to share the recording of this with fellow workers and people that you know in the industry. And I'll go back to, see something, say something. If you don't know what to look for, this will really help you to do that and then say something. And then also, I think that to challenge the industry, not just the people on here, but the whole industry, is if you have a good idea and it's working, please bring that forward. And Christina, I'll pick on you a little bit. With your new product stuff and approving that product, if there's a product out there, you want to hear about it. And, it might be the best mousetrap that you have to do that. And I think that's what the chapter's been all about for the last 30 years and sharing that. And we want to continue to do that. So thank you for your time.
Oh, and learning something, John, you're so right. So our sign policy we have online for North Dakota LTAP for our townships, counties, and cities. And thanks, Vic. We're going to be adding sign support. Going to expand that section in our sign policy. Great tip. And that's just one of the many. Panelists, I'd like to go around if you have any closing comments. I'll start with you, Vic.
All right. Well, thanks again for that, Dale. I really don't have anything specific to what we talked about, but I'll close with this. A couple years ago, I worked with our county board to pass a county board resolution talking about traffic safety in general and really what the position of the county is formally with regards to traffic safety, because really before that, it was just whatever I did and that was about it. But now the county board is actually on record, on policy of saying, this is what we believe about traffic safety. And so I would encourage you as a local agency to work with your board to actually adopt a similar policy like that. One of the statements in our board resolution says, we believe that traffic fatalities are simply unacceptable on the county road system. Something like that, right? Where you as an agency would say, hey, this is what we believe and this is what we're going to pursue. So that's my admonition for today, or my 1.5 cents of opinion. Hopefully that'll be helpful for you as you think about what you can do in your community. Thanks.
Nice job, Vic. And a quick story before we get to you, James and Brian. Driving to work this week, and as I'm driving through town, there's 2 young students getting ready to cross to the high school. And as they enter the crosswalk, they look up, I acknowledge them, they start walking. They both waved to me in recognition that they saw me, and they crossed safely. And I wanted to stop and give them an award. And give them an award because how many times in our work zones, on the roadway, in town going across the crosswalk, do we see that there's this lack of self-preservation or lack of awareness by people where the others that crossed the crosswalk assume that they had the right of way? They never looked up. They didn't acknowledge. I didn't acknowledge because there was no eye contact. They assumed that because they had right of way, they could cross the crosswalk. And that's true. They have the right. However, I'm driving a 3,000-pound missile that's going to win every time. And so see something, say something. John, love it. Helping others towards zero is an extremely difficult effort. It takes all of us together to make that happen. So kind of weird story, but that self-preservation, let's take it to our teams and make sure that everybody in our group gets home safe every day. So with that, James, closing comments.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I think about is that, the vehicle fleet system, it's changed over the years, since 1993 with 350. And, with MASH, it's addressing that. And it does cause a lot of change, to get hardware and devices up to speed, and so that takes some growth. But I think it's so important to look at how do we meet the needs today for the vehicles that are out there.
Well, one thing that I saw in your presentation on the Texas single slope, 36-inch minimum requirement, you're going to 38. I'm sure that happened in culmination of efforts with discussions with your maintenance, with your designers, your construction, your suppliers, contractors. Great move, looking ahead, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Brian.
Hey, thanks, Dale. Whether it's a local agency or state DOT, we all focus on safety, and we always strive to have safer roads. And a lot of times with some of the advances in safety devices or putting additional chevrons out or more guardrail wherever we need to, or, our high tension cable, a lot of times I think what I hear from whether it's a local agency or state folks, maintenance forces, sometimes we get hung up on the fact that, well, that's going to require more maintenance, or we got to mow around it, things like that. And, I just urge everybody not to focus on the additional maintenance requirements or additional mowing or different things like that may occur. And you focus on what the intent of what we're trying to do. That's to save people's lives out there, whether that's, in a pedestrian setting, an urban area, vehicles crossing the median, people staying on the roadway. We can't focus on a little bit extra increased maintenance when we're talking to people's lives out there. So any pushback on increased maintenance, we need to push back and looking at what we're truly trying to do here to save people's lives and keep people going home and seeing their families.
Wow, love that, Brian. I'll carry it to the local network in North Dakota, and I hope, though unfortunately I don't believe, I hope that other states are like it. On our local network, we've got a lot of ground to make in signing. On the low volume roadways, we have this understanding or misunderstanding that putting up traffic control signs, warning the public of our upcoming work activities, whether they're windrows, whether they're taking a culvert out, are just extra work. And we need to flip that switch. We need to think differently, as you and Vic and others have shared, and start putting those up. They are a necessity to make sure our friends and neighbors make it home safe every day. So in North Dakota and other areas, I challenge everyone to take and make that conscious switch to doing better with providing that advance notice to motorists. And then, thank you, Brian. And then Doug, we didn't get to hear from you. I'm going to do a little prelude, and if you are willing to jump in, I'd love it. Doug Schumacher is just an absolute awesome resource. Doug, I want to say a great big thank you for helping North Dakota LTAP kick off our signing program, the one that we currently have. It is a giant step forward. We're so pleased to present that. We presented anywhere from 1 to 20 times, 20 being to small groups every year. And you are absolutely a wonderful resource. Doug, if you want to chime in and say greetings or share any info, we'd love it.
Well, I want to thank, ATSSA for putting on this virtual. I know a lot of people out of the traffic safety section at the NDDOT commented last spring about how they would miss going to it. So I think if we get back into person, I think that'll be a good thing. And I think one of the big things, not only, swapping stories and stuff, but it's just the personal contacts. You talk to people on the phone, you talk to manufacturers, suppliers, other DOTs or whatever, and you get to stick a face to the name. So, and I echo everybody else, safety is a big deal. I'm in the traffic safety section. The word safety is in the title itself. So we put a big emphasis on safety, and we're always glad to help. Some of the counties, if you don't know, look for your peers, go through Brian Fuchs there at North Dakota DOT or whomever, or direct contact. These presentations are out there, our emails are on there, our phone numbers on there. Please use them if you don't know. So if you don't know, ask questions is a good little topic there. So thank you.
Oh, well said, Doug. And adding on to the DOT experts, remember that their contractors, our suppliers, are absolute subject matter experts. Tap into them too. And looking forward to March of 2022, and we're in person again for this event. Thank you for those remarks, Doug. Christina, if you would. And
got to take it off mute. I think the one thing that I'd want to say about all this is the sharing of information. I always take away more from these events. I'm my state's expert on certain topics, but then seeing what we do the same and what we do differently with North Dakota and Minnesota, I think helps out all of our programs. And we have those relationships and can talk about, well, why'd you guys do this? Or so you guys have moved to this item, should we be looking at that? And being able to share what we've learned and already produced. And nobody has to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's the really great benefit of the how-to.
Wow, well said. Thank you. And so a few closing comments. The Road Scholar and the PDH Forum, Denise Brown, our NDLTAP program manager, has those in the Q&A links, and she's also got a link to our website. So watch, we'll be posting this information, the presentations and the recording on the website, and that'll be on shortly. So please tap into that. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Celebrate our differences. They're our strength. And then looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at the same time, 9 to 11, for another great learning session where we're going to learn a bit about work zone, traffic control, and safety aspects, and then pavement marking. So on behalf of the Northland ATSSA chapter, North Dakota LTAP, all three of our LTAPs, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and SRF, John and your team, a great big thank you. Thank you, everyone. That concludes today's presentations. Be safe. Grab your safety tagline. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.